Hello, everybody. And I just want to introduce our panelists for tonight, if we want to call them that. All members of the BC Sports Hall of Fame. Laurie Fung, everybody knows from her great career as a rhythmic gymnastic and one of the legendary people in her sport in this country. Pamela, one of our great swimmers in British Columbia that we've produced, and an Olympic medalist, and Robin Bawa, who was the first Indo-Canadian from BC to play in the NHL, and will be an inductee along with me this year in the longest induction process in history, the class of 2020. Anyway, so welcome everybody.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to start with Laurie and Pamela, just because I go back to a time where it was a shining moment for a lot of us in British Columbia. It was 1984 and the LA Olympics. And of course, Laurie, everybody knows the unbelievable story you had there with a breakthrough sport that was just making its introduction into the games. I just want to go back to that time, and it was a tremendous story for British Columbia. Not only was there you two, but the rowers from Elk Lake here on the island were producing medals, unbelievable, gold medalists, like I said, the men's 8 and 2, Silken Laumann getting her first her start at a games, and of course your guys' contribution to that, and just an amazing medal total for us as a province, and it was an amazing time for this province to have produced all these athletes. And what do you remember going back to that time, Laurie? And what's your fondest memories of that period?
I think it was just getting to the Olympics, because it was a very long road. Being a new sport and being pretty much unrecognized as a sport, and Canada, and for us to be the first time in the Olympics, they were making it very hard, and I don't know, no pun intended. We were jumping through a lot of hoops to make sure we got there to be qualified. And I didn't actually know I was qualified to be in the Olympics until about June of just prior, when in 1984. And so I really didn't feel like I was an Olympian until the summer began. And so for me, it was just about getting there, and then everything else just took a life of its own, and the results ended up being amazing and changed my life. Golden
results.
Yes.
Pam, what do you remember? Especially you were part of an amazing UBC and SFU had their share of athletes, but UVic was amazing that year with yourself and the rowers, and also the basketball players who made the semifinals. Eli Pasquale, Gerald Kazanowski, Greg Wilcher, and the like from here, and the British Columbia contribution beyond that to Howard Kelsey and those guys, and the swimming group was amazing too, and the bronze medal in the relay. What do you remember about LA and just those games and the BC's contribution to it?
Well, like Laurie, I didn't make Olympic team until June, and so it was a little bit bittersweet for me, because my father had just passed away 2.5, 3 months prior, and he was the first Indo-Canadian to make an Olympic team in field hockey in 1964, first Indo-Canadian, and so he had passed away, and so there was a lot of, like I said, bittersweet. I felt I was embodying him, and that I got some strength somewhere for it, because it was a long road for the previous 3 years. He was very ill, and so I had been on national team for a number of years, and so it seemed like just another swim meet, and you kind of have to treat it that way too, not to get all caught up in the whole hype of it, and. But just making the Olympics, lifelong dream from a childhood. And like Laurie said, yeah, it did change my life, most definitely.
Robin, you come from a different era. What was it like starting out for you in the Cowichan Valley as a young hockey player?
Well, I like to think of it as just as an every ordinary day kid, but I started playing hockey in grade 3. My doctor told my mom I should play sports because I had asthma, so I started playing hockey. My dad used to, come home every day after work. He'd get up at 4 in the morning, come home at 5. We'd go to the pond, skate a little bit, learn how to skate. it was just, I was just a normal kid, growing up, and, you want to play the game of hockey. And the first few years were just a lot of fun. You're out there, you don't know. I used to think that junior B was the NHL, like the Shannon Full Lake Flyers was the NHL. And we used to go watch buddy of mine, Doug Bodger, his brother, play in Full Lake. And, we always thought that that's where we wanted to play in junior B. And we didn't have that many aspirations of, we didn't have any experience in hockey. My family didn't have any experience in hockey, so it was sports. My dad and my mom, they took that approach, with that non-pressure approach to hockey that actually made me want to play the game and love the game. So, when I turned 16, is that's when I started to get more serious. And, but I really enjoyed those early years in living in Cowichan Valley, living in Duncan, and playing the game that you love.
Right. Everybody has a sort of a turning point story in their lives, in their athletic career. Maybe it happened at 8, maybe it happened at 12, maybe it happened at 14, maybe it happened at 11. Lori, do you remember any one turning point for you where you felt that set me off on my path?
Well, it was, I was 12 turning 13. I had seen previous Olympic Games on the television. I was just a normal kid. I wasn't involved in organized sport. And I remember seeing the Olympics, the 72 Olympics, and then the 76 Olympics. And I remember seeing the amazing gymnasts of Olga Korbut and Nadia Comaneci. And I remember just looking at these people that were just so beyond what I could even imagine. But I had something that was born inside me that said, I really want to do this. And then I was 12 turning 13, and I got invited to be on the little gymnastics team, 45 minutes once a week in my elementary school. And as far as I was concerned, that was my launching pad into the Olympics. Of course, there was no rhythmic gymnastics at that point. It wasn't even in the Olympics. And it just took off from there, but it didn't matter to me because I just got to be able to start to taste what I really wanted to do. And I mean, I thought I wanted to do artistic gymnastics because that's all I'd ever seen was Olga Korbut and Nadia Comaneci. And then somebody introduced me at age 14 to rhythmic gymnastics. It was very unknown. And I came home from the gym and I said to my parents, I'm going to go to the Olympics. I know what I want to do. And my poor parents, they were just looking at each other going, well, when are we going to tell her that sport's not even in the Olympics? And I was like determined, and I was saying, I'm going to do that. And I think I willed it to happen. I willed that it would be there in 1984. It was happened to be the time that I was at my peak. And I just feel like there's something out there that allowed it to happen because I wanted it so badly.
Interesting.
So that was my turning point when I told everyone I was going to the Olympics in a sport that wasn't even in the Olympics.
Well, that's a leap of faith for sure, Laura.
Yes.
Pam, do you remember a moment? I mean, you come from like you said, you mentioned your father, and you come from a long lineage of sport at high level, the Olympic level. Was there a moment for you in minor sports that you felt that got you on your career to where you eventually got?
I think I was such an exceptional young swimmer from the time I was 8, 9, and 10 years old. And I remember even going to international meets. I mean, just California. And California has had like the prime swimmers of the world, and so even going to California and you're racing against all these strangers you didn't have any access to before, and I was winning races and people were going, who's this from Canada, and that kind of thing, and setting Canadian records at that age and that kind of thing. So I had an early taste of real success and talent, and I always say I was probably a better swimmer for my age group when I was 10 than I was later, but so I really had some really positive reinforcement from an early age, and it was just the trajectory. And just like Lori, I mean, Nadia Comaneci and Olga Korbut and all the swimmers at 76 and 72, Mark Spitz, I was just too big for gymnastics, even though my dad built us a balance beam in our backyard and we were doing, round offs and everything, but just too big for gymnastics. So swimming it was. He built a pool in our backyard and we never got out of it in the summer, and signed us up for the swim club in Surrey. The Surrey Knights had just started, and the rest is history.
Great. And yeah, it's amazing when you look back on the little steps along the way, right? So,
Yeah.
Robin, was there a special, do you remember making a rep team for the first time that thought, oh, maybe I can get to the WHL? And was there a moment in your life where it just sort of went from house to rep for you, or a moment like that?
Well, maybe when I was about 8 or 9 years old, after I had a few years of skating under my belt, where I played back in the day they called it Pee Wee Pup, and that was Adam. My first year was house league, and then my second year was Pee Wee Pup. And I'm not sure, from there something just triggered, and you know, I ended up getting 100 and something goals that one year in 80 games and 100 and something assists. So from there, it just you know, it built from there. And once you get to a certain level, the confidence that you gain from, you know, having a little bit of success, it can go a long way. But you know, after that, when I turned into junior, and going back, that the turning point was, I think mine was when I was 18. I almost quit hockey, and then luckily I had some family support. You know, my mom's younger two brothers and my two brother-in-laws, they showed me some tough love. You know, they didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. They told me what I needed to hear. So from that point, you know, my career took a turn. And another person was Ken Hitchcock. He brought me from the U.S. to Kamloops, and I like to think of it. I was his little project. You know, he showed me how to work smarter. You know, how to become a leader, and he was one of the guys that really got me. You know, got me to the next step to the NHL.
And good old Hitch made it to the NHL himself, right? From
Sure did.
WHL. Yeah. That leads to my next question. Laurie, was there an individual, either family or coach, that you remember that if that cog didn't happen, if that person didn't say that to me, if that coach wasn't there for me, or if that family member wasn't, it might not have happened. It might have all just stopped.
Yes. When I was dreaming of seeing Olga Korbut and Nadia Comaneci at the Olympics, and I was saying, I really want to go to the Olympics, there were so many people that were actually pretty blunt with me and saying, well, your sport isn't even in the Olympics, and you're just a kid from East Van, and so you can't go to the Olympics. And I always thought that I just thought that I had a lot of perseverance. My mother said it was a lot of stubbornness. When someone would say no, I would say yes. And it was a really down time. And then in the 76 Olympics, I was just in my room, and my sister started screaming from the other room saying, come see, come see. The Olympics was on, and there was a boy named Greg Joy jumping for Canada. And my sister was jumping up and down. She goes, he goes to my high school. He goes to my high school. So I'm looking at the screen going, oh, everybody told me that I couldn't go to the Olympics because you had to be Russian or Romanian if you wanted to go to the Olympics. I didn't even know where Russia and Romania were. And then she's telling me that this boy from Vancouver Tech High School was at the Olympics and he won a silver medal. So in a way, Greg inspired me to realize you can be a kid from East Van and you can go to the Olympics. I still had the other problem. My sport wasn't in the Olympics, but it was all like, you know, I was able to put it all together. And I think that really told me that what everyone was saying to me, that you won't make it, you're not, you know, you're not an Eastern European gymnast, blah, blah, this and that. And I just said, no, I'm going to do it. And I set my sights on that. And it was with the biggest inspiration and the support of my parents, because they were such hard workers. They were so dedicated to, not to my sport. They never came, they just let me do what I wanted to do, but they instilled in me hard work and work ethic. And that's what took off and made it happen for me.
So great. So, and of course, all of us remember of a certain age, the CBC sign off for many years was Greg Joy. If he stayed up till 2 or 3 and they signed off, it was Greg Joy jump into the silver medal in Montreal in '76. Yeah. And yeah, and the only You won gold, Laurie, of course, but in '76 we were the only host nation ever to win and not to win a gold medal in hosting the games, right? So, and that's why there were no '80 Olympics for summer, anyways, in Moscow. So it was quite amazing to see all those gold medalists from Canada and from British Columbia in LA in '84. And I think it was a great catharsis, for a lot of people in sports in this country. So, and you were part of that. It was great. So, and Pam, you mentioned your dad. Was there anybody else, coach or something you remember that just being a key cog in that at that moment where you needed it most?
I just need to put this out there for the record that even in swimming in 1976, we would have a number of gold medals. At that time, GDR was participating, and
of course,
there was the whole drug issue, and so just want to put that out there.
It's quite a controversial. When you look at that team that Canada had in '76 was quite amazing for swimming, especially the women's side, and then to be, of course, denied by East Germany, and we know later of why Canada was denied all those medals.
So on that, on that same vein, some of the young women that definitely were on that 1976 Olympic team, and particularly Shannon Smith, who was from my own home club, the Hayek's home club, and she won a bronze in the Olympics, and she would have won a silver, I think, if the GDR thing. And she was only 14 years old, and she was, a few years older than me, and she was in my own club, and I'm like, wow. So definitely her and a few other people from my own local swim club, and they were big inspirations. And of course, my coach, Ron Jacks, who was a 3-time, Olympian, amazing athlete, and he was my coach, and so someone to look up to definitely was him, and just what he had achieved. Of course,
Ron Jacks, came to Victoria, became a great coach here, and covered him for many years. A great guy. Robin, you mentioned Hitch. Is there anybody else, family or coach, that you really stood out in your mind that came along at just the right moment for you?
Well, I think a lot of it for me was my family. I had a lot of support. My mom, dad, my 2 sisters, and my parents taught me the work ethic, as Laurie said. Parents had such an influence on me as far as just being disciplined and have to working hard. And like my dad said, if whatever you do in life, you got to work hard. If nothing comes easy, especially if you're a minority. But my mom was a disciplinarian. We weren't allowed to do too many things back in the day, and that got me off to the right start. And then from there, I remember Coach Jack Rochon. He was my coach from Pee Wee Pup to Bantam, and he was one of the best minor hockey league coaches that I ever had. And so in that respect, and then after that, I was fortunate, and like I said, I mentioned my mom's 2 younger brothers and my brother-in-laws, along the way. And then, I had Hitch, and then I ended up having Pat Quinn as a coach, and, I had Brian Murray as a coach. So I was very fortunate to have some good mentors and good coaches. And I think that's half the battle. If you have people that believe in you, and, and I had that, and, it's for the road for success.
And to flip that on its head now, you guys became role models for many people. Laurie, you especially for your sport. I mean, just revolutionized the sport in this country and in North America in many ways. And how do you feel as your role as a role model, which you keep doing now, as a coach in your sport, and how seriously and how important is that to you to carry on that mantle for the younger people in this province?
I'm so honored that people consider me a role model. I mean, I have now been coaching or owned a club for, oh my goodness, since 1988. And the number of children that have come through my program, whether they be in a recreational level, provincial level, I've had national champions, they've even had some Olympians come out of our club. And no matter what, it's been so satisfying to see them all develop and grow to their potential. I mean, my biggest success story was an athlete who never went anything further than the provincial level, but she came as an athlete that she was a young girl with no confidence. She was very introverted, and the sport, and she has since written me and told me that my input in her life has changed her life. She's now a very successful executive for a very big company. And she said it was through her training in gymnastics. And like I said, she never went much further than the provincial level, but it was everything that happened. And so even though I've had Olympians and national champions, multiple national champions, I think that particular story is what I remember as being a big accomplishment. And so I think that is, it makes it wonderful, and I want to carry on a legacy, and I hope it always carries on.
Great. Pam, you're also a member of the UVic Hall of Fame, and they always point to you as your class, you and the Kellys were the ones who started that great tradition in swimming in UVic. And of course, I was coming out of Surrey, just being a role model for that group of people that look up to you and what you accomplished in those early years for BC swimming, of that generation that came after you. How important is that for you as a legacy?
Yeah, it is an honor to be told you are a role model. And it's interesting because even 25, 30, 40 years after, you get, people who recognize you and they say you've affected my life and I was inspired by you and that kind of thing. And it really is humbling too. And I went into teaching also. And so just the same character and virtues that I had as a swimmer went into my teaching and that kind of thing. And just like Robin said, it's just, discipline, self-discipline is a huge thing. And one thing I do definitely say, I can say came from an immigrant, the immigrant story, and that we kind of overcompensated for, sort of not feeling up to, the dominant culture sometimes. I think there's a deep-rooted psychology in that, but it turned into a good thing. So I just try to do everything with integrity, and I'm working now, in social justice movements that people think I'm a great role model, and they thank me all the time. And it's the same things that carry through from being an athlete that I take to everything in my life. And yeah, every time someone recognizes me or says I was a role model, I'm deeply humbled. And yeah.
And Robin, same question to you. Thanks, Pam. There's 10 South Asians now, not South Asians, sorry, Asians and South Asians in the NHL, and you were on, in the leading edge of that. How does it feel for you to be a role model for so many hockey players who are now, coming out of places like Surrey minor hockey and making it to pro hockey?
Like the girl said, it's an honor, to be a role model and to have people think of you as a role model. When you're in the midst of it and you're in the thick of things, you're not really thinking of being a role model. You're trying to just do your best and hopefully, you're doing good things. So while you're in the thick of things, you're being a good role model. But afterwards, when you retire and when you start coaching kids, and I started coaching my son when he started playing hockey, and for the first couple of years, you're just making sure the kids have fun. That's all you're doing, is making sure they have fun. They're sticking with the game. They're coming back to the rink every day. Then after a few years, when the kids get a little more serious and the parents are a little more serious, then you realize that maybe you can pass on some of your stories, your the bumps in the road that you had to the parents, and teaching the kids a little bit more about what path you took and just general things like that, and how many doors that sports and hockey can open up for you. And now seeing that there's so many more South Asians or people of all colors playing hockey, for instance, and it's a good feeling. And I think that it's especially BC, there's a lot of different races in here, a lot of different types of people. So it's really good to see different kids, boys and girls, playing hockey. I think back in the day when I played, I was the only South Asian kid playing. There wasn't anybody. There's some kids that played maybe street hockey every day with our neighborhood kids. We played on a daily basis, road hockey, and that was all South Asian kids. But when it turned to ice hockey, there was nobody to be found. So fast forward to today, it's quite it's a good feeling that that a lot of kids of our race are playing hockey.
Laurie, what was your lived experience growing up of Asian heritage in BC? Did you face a lot of prejudice as in school and in your sporting life? What was it like for you growing up Asian in BC?
I think there was times that I was sort of I felt like I was put down because I was Asian. But I think the part of me that didn't want to confront it because I was just told to be quiet, and that's unfortunately a trait I think that we're taught, is to be respectful and to always. But I was always saddened when people disrespected me, when they would say things like, "Oh, you're just a kid from East Van," but sometimes they would say, "Oh, you're just a Chinese kid from East Van." And I would get a little bit upset. I mean, I'm half Chinese and I'm half Japanese, so I have all the Asian, you know. But that really hurt. And a lot of times I didn't want to really speak about it. I didn't want to say it to my family because I know that there was things my mom's family went through the Japanese internment. My father sometimes very rarely spoke about how it was for him growing up. I mean, I'm second generation Canadian. My father and my mother were both born in Canada, and he still tells of the times that he was he was spoken to as a lower class. And yet my father was in medical school, and he was one of the first, Asians to be able to finish that. And so instead of being proud of it, he would tell us a little bit about that. So I didn't want to say to them that I was being teased at school or I was doing this. I did go through some bullying at school, and it was gymnastics that took me out of that. And I felt so relieved to have that outlet. And in the end, when I came home so successful and was able to hear from a lot of people, some people that had bullied me as well, and they had changed, it gave me a little bit of confidence that things could change. But I think a lot of times I held it in, didn't want to talk about it, because if I didn't talk about it, then it really wasn't happening. But that's not the right way it should be. And now, as we see today, they're encouraging people to speak out, but you see the racism on TV, and you're hearing about people that they don't want to say anything about it. And I guess that's what we're ingrained to believe. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I was sort of taught that.
Interesting. Pam, what was your lived experience growing up Indo-Canadian in British Columbia?
Well, I had a father who he scored the winning goal for the Canadian national field hockey team in Lyon, France, and they qualified to the Olympics. He was star forward, and he was removed from the Olympic team at the last minute. They wanted an all-white contingent, and so my dad never really let us see or feel that, but I do know that he definitely put us, all four of us kids, into a sport where it was objective, where it was time, that there was nothing to be judged or thrown off a team and that kind of thing. So it was just time, and that was swimming. And so I do know that did have an effect. And it definitely did trickle down to me. There was, I did have some name calling and that kind of thing in my swim club when I was up on the blocks. And yeah, and even recently, I had children or young adults, whatever, teenagers. I was a high school teacher, but I would tell them I went to the Olympics for swimming or just Olympics, and I won a medal, and they'd say, "For what country?" And that was often a comment. Obviously implying it can't be for Canada. You're a brown person.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, and so. Yeah, that's really interesting whenever I get that comment kind of thing. So there definitely was racism. I had it as a child growing up in a elementary school, where I think there was maybe one other family that came in later that was South Asian. But there was just us. But like Laurie said, we weren't taught to recognize it really, or we just sort of swallowed it. And it probably did. It did have an effect. There's no doubt on. I'd have to say more my sisters and brothers, because swimming I was very successful. So it sort of made up for, that other sort of taunting and that kind of thing. It's kind of like, see, I'm good at something. There's almost this impetus to prove yourself even more. And I was very fortunate that I did have this talent. And but I do know that for sure that some of my other family members probably experienced, a bit more effects on their life.
That's interesting you mentioned that, because I was gonna, as I go into Robin now, uh, that you would hear it on the on the starting blocks in swimming, because I thought you and Laurie would never hear something like that in your sport because it's not that kind of sport. But it's interesting that even that you would even in swimming and gymnastics you might hear barbs that are unkind, right? That based on race.
It wasn't unkind. It was minor teasing or that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah,
But nowadays it would be called racist or
yeah,
something.
yeah. Robin,
Actually, can I just say something?
yes,
Just
yeah,
remind
sorry,
me.
Laurie, yeah.
At the Olympics, when I won the gold medal, a lot of people think that I won the gold medal on August the 12th, because that's when it was announced here in Canada, because the CBC crew was over at the boxing ring, because it was supposed to be Willie DeWitt and Sean
Willie DeWitt,
Sullivan
yeah,
who
yeah.
were going to win the gold medals.
Yeah.
And so they didn't have any coverage over at the Rhythmic. And when they found out that I had actually won the evening of August the 11th, there was something over the wire that said, somebody's got to get a camera crew over to the Poly Pavilion because Laurie Fung won the Olympics. And it apparently came over the wire that Laurie Fung of China won the Olympics.
Oh, really? I don't remember. That's interesting. Yeah.
And I remember hearing that, and I laughed it off, but I mean, it's like, but it just kind of reminded me of that.
That's
Sorry
an
for
incredible story. Think about it. Yeah. Robin, you come from a body contact sport where things are said all the time, and hockey is quite a vicious sport in terms of racism. I was growing up in both lacrosse and hockey. Things were said to me all the time. Which were just not even, like as Pam said, maybe mildly racist in swimming, but just bluntly racist. And you've spoken about this and the abuse you've taken it coming up in hockey. Can you speak to that a bit? Just some of the things that you just had to harden yourself against as an Asian British Columbian.
Yeah, definitely. I think that as a child, as a teenager, I experienced racism just like any other minority kid did back in the day, and in hockey it happened too. Hockey is part of society, and racism is part of society. So I think that when I was not playing hockey in grade 1, 2, and 3, we all experienced racism. There's always bullies out there in grade 6, 7. I was grade 1 and 2, and they would say things, and my parents just taught me to, you can't pay too much attention to that. You have to fight through the adversity. People are like that, and they're not educated, and that sort of thing. So that got me a little prepared for when I started playing hockey. There was kids out there sometimes, and there wasn't that many. There was maybe one, and depends what city you played in, right? If you went to certain areas of the island, there was kids that were throwing out remarks, but sometimes even parents. But end of the day, when I became a better hockey player, it motivated me. My dad used to say, just go score a goal. So it motivated me to score a goal or do well at somebody. So then when you're doing well, they can't really say too much, right? So it was, we got out of minor hockey for a while, went to junior hockey, and it was still there. Racism was still there. You had the odd player, say something, but I was surrounded by good players, really good leaders like Dean Ellison, Daryl Ray, and Hitch was the coaching. So when you're surrounded by good people and good leaders, they look out for you. So in that respect, I didn't, you probably get as much bullied or get many racist remarks thrown at me because of those guys. And when I turned pro, and when I went and turned pro, my first year, I got signed with Washington Capitals. I got sent to their farm team, and it was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and that was the Midwest, and that was, they didn't even know what I was. They thought, I tried to tell them I was East Indian, and they're like, "What Indian? What tribe?" And then I said, I was trying to say I'm Western Canada, and then they thought I lived in Alaska, and we lived in igloos. I'm telling a true story, and I just, it was funny. I just said, where Seattle, Washington is? I'm 2 hours above that, and it ended like that. And then I just said I'm Canadian. People in the 80s in the Midwest, they weren't educated, and that's just the way they were. And at the time, I was a goal scorer, and I didn't have it in me to battle back, right? So coming out of junior, I had 57 goals, and playing for Hitch, he made me a goal scorer. So I was going there to become a goal scorer. I didn't score, the first couple of games, and I got in a fight because some guy said something to me. So, you know, basically fought out of fear and actually won the fight. So the next game, I don't score, I don't fight, and then I don't play. So then I played, and same thing happened again. I got an altercation and I won again. And I was like, told the coach, no, I'm a goal scorer. I'm not a fighter. So but you know, that year was trial and error, and I defended myself. A lot of it was because, you know, a minority kid going into the U.S., into the Midwest, getting challenged by a lot of the other players, right? Who were Caucasian, and didn't realize that, you know, an Indo-Canadian or East Indian kid was playing hockey, and there wasn't any back then, even in pro. So, you know, that year was trial and error. It made myself a better person. It made me an all-around player. I gained respect from my opponents, from my teammates. And my following year, I played in Baltimore, and you know, I ended up getting the confidence that I needed, and I was the second leading goal scorer and then second most penalties. And then I got to the point where, you know, I could handle myself, and the comments kind of stopped, because they knew that if they were going to say something, I had a release in hockey. You know, you couldn't do that in the street, but you can do it in hockey, where you can fight back and defend yourself. And then the third year, you know, I made to Washington. So in NHL, you know, I could honestly say I didn't experience any racism when I was in Washington. It did happen on the way on route, but to NHL, it's just, you know, people are professionals there, and, you know, they're there for a reason. They don't really, you know, want to waste their energy of, you know, pointing out people's color.
Yeah. Laurie, it's been an incredible year for race relations in the world, North America and Canada. Obviously, Black Lives Matter movement, and you know, the recent anti-Asian prejudice and you know, some violence, even, as we've seen, you know, even on, you know, streets of British Columbia. What do you feel about the current state of race relations in British Columbia?
Well, it breaks my heart when I've seen all of the things that I've seen. I think best put, last year we did a little outdoor year-end show due to COVID for our gymnastics club. And I had several of our gymnasts who were ages 12, 13, come up to me and say, you know, Laurie, every year we always donate the money, like it was like through donations. Parents come and watch and do donations, and we always give it to the food bank, or we donate to a worthy charity. And these young girls came to me and said, we really want to know if there's an organization for racial justice. And I looked at them and I thought I said, well, like, you know, the Black Lives Matter, because that was all what was happening. And they just said, can it be for something else, like racial justice? And these were two of my athletes who were spokespeople for our kids in the club. And one of them was South Asian and the other one was Asian. And I realized that they had some things in their heart, that things had happened to them because they wanted. So I realized that it was really hitting home. And, you know, that our athletes, our young athletes, and I have many athletes in my program that are Asian. And I guess I didn't realize that it had touched right home. And so that made me feel really bad, but really good that these children came up to talk to me about it. And so that was what we did. We made a donation to racial justice. And I think that sort of showed me that it was right in our backyard.
Yeah, interesting. Pam, you have taught in your career, retired now, a teacher in. What do you see as the situation as far as racism goes in British Columbia now, and dealing with young people all your life as you have as a teacher? What does the future hold in terms of what you've seen in their attitudes?
That's a big question. I can go on for a few hours. I've really taken a very serious approach to being an advocate of anti-racism and being a BIPOC person, so Black, Indigenous, or person of color. So it is actually it's a lifelong purpose of mine to combat some of the ignorance and that kind of thing. I just have to say that it's when I went through sport, you did have to play the white card. I was very white coated. I was very shy to express my own culture. I was very shy to even say I'd eat curry. Like, I mean, that's how, it was. And so there's a lot of white, brown people out there, if you know what I mean. Like, and so just to be able to express your own culture within a white dominated institutions, such as some of the sport that has like hockey and gymnastics, Asians are now quite involved, but it wasn't accessible to people of color. The immigrant story was people who were just working hard jobs. They didn't have the money to put their kids into these kind of sports and that kind of thing. And so we're seeing a bit of a change with that, definitely. And definitely we're seeing a change in terms of just for Asian cultures, in terms of the female access, to sport, which was not encouraged. My dad was a huge feminist. I'm very fortunate for that. But, girls didn't go into sport because it just wasn't seen as a thing culturally to do. And so I'm a huge advocate of just, saying, that these girls can do anything that they want to do. And, as far as me, I'm a huge advocate. Right now, I'm actually one of the leads at camp to save our old growth forest here in BC. And some of the Indigenous youth women, they call me auntie. And so I feel very, very honored, and that my status as a person of color is going toward changing our world. And
well put, Pam. Robin, you're now involved in business in this province. Do you, at the business level, do you notice any sort of hints of racism as you deal with people? Or are people beyond that now, do you think, at that level?
I think it still exists. I think that you don't blatantly see it. Maybe it's hidden, a little more hidden racism. Most of our business is done on the phone, so it's you don't know who, you can't tell the color of someone's skin through the phone. So in that respect, you don't realize who's on the other end and who you're dealing with. But it still exists. I think that we have a family business, so it's different, right? It's my grandpa came over in 1906. Moved to a small community in Paldy and raised 5 kids. So then our parents had a successful transport company, and the kids, we took it over, and our cousin and I, and we had I wouldn't say a little easier road in business. I think that we built it up to the point where it is now. But I think that if you're working for an employer that you have no relationship with, I'm sure there's issues out there of race and status and all sorts of things. And we've come a long way from when I was a teenager, though. We came a long way, but there's we made big strides, but there's a long way to go yet. A long way to go yet. And people like Pamela are making a big change.
As we conclude this tremendously insightful conversation, I just want to get back to the role model aspect. You guys are role models, tremendous role models, not only for Asians, South Asians, but for all British Columbians. Laurie, you're still involved with the young kids, but I'm going to ask everybody in closing, people see you guys' careers and they always ask you, how do I follow in your footsteps? How do I do what you did? Laurie, you're involved in that day to day still. What do you tell these kids, these young athletes?
I tell them that it's okay to dream, even if it seems like, and if it seems like it's impossible, you have to still follow the dream, and you have to never give up. And I think, as my mom and dad would say, I was so stubborn. I would never, ever let anybody tell me I wasn't going to do something. I call it perseverance. They call it stubborn. But I always just tell the kids, it's okay to dream, even if you don't make it, even if just the fact that you tried is so much more important than never even wanting to look at the future and see what the potential is. And I think that's the most important thing.
Great advice, Laurie. Pam, people who look up to you and go, "Oh, you were an Olympian. My kid is involved in this sport or that sport. What should I tell them?" What do you tell young people who are really interested in sports now and who want to make it to a high level, or maybe just have fun in the sport and just enjoy it for what it is?
I just say, you know what, it to me, it comes down to self-discipline and integrity. And if you really want to do something, if you really want to achieve something, then you have to make some sacrifices. And sometimes, young people are, they're on their phones and they're caught up with a lot of distractions and that kind of thing. And so, it's sort of making some of the sacrifices, and having sort of not immediate gratification goals, and that kind of thing comes from our families too. And one thing about Asian families is, like, my swimming career, I do not give the credit to myself at all. It was an entire family thing, and I'm actually in awe of those athletes who I see and who I hear of, and who did it all on their own. I'm just amazed that some of them could do it all on their own. But definitely having some kind of support network, and having a good sense of long-term goals.
Thanks, Pam. Robin, you're in the sport, which is the great Canadian sport, the great Canadian dream for so many kids who start off in minor hockey, and their parents, unfortunately. You hear it all the time. How can I make it to the NHL? What do you tell these kids in minor hockey?
Have fun, enjoy it, right? Because, when kids get to a certain age, right? When kids are 7, 8 years old, every parent thinks that their child is going to make the NHL. Every parent, up to about 12. And then there's, like Pamela said, there's distractions. There's a fork in the road, right? There's the kids, social media that comes to play, the videos, you name it, right? The devices. So there's choices that they have to make, and you have to stay the course. You have to stay disciplined. You have to have a work ethic. The parents can't want it more than the kids, so if you stay the course, I didn't realize till I was 19 that basically, and this is such a simple thing, but it's in my own mind where, I used to think, growing up, this kid's so much better than me, this guy. Then I realized, that guy, he puts on one skate at a time, right? I've never seen anybody jump in both skates at once. So once I got over that, then I started thinking about equality, and inclusion and all that stuff, where I'm just as good as that guy. Now it's the mindset. And if you have the proper mindset, throughout your career, throughout your journey, right, there's a lot of things that you can do. You stay the course, and like Laurie says, keep the dream alive.
Great. And we're right up to it now, but I want a final quick answer from you. You guys have a relationship with your sport now. Laurie, do you ever bring the rings out just for the heck of it?
Oh, well, I tell all my students I can still do everything, but it's not true. I'd end up in the hospital, but no, I'm at the gym all the time and with the kids, and so I feel like it's all part of me every day, and I just love it. It's a part of me, and it always will be.
Pam, do you ever go out for laps at the pool and just want to overtake that next person next to you?
Sadly to say, I don't actually go to the pool. But I had to put in a pool in my backyard. So I have a huge pool in my backyard because and every time I go travel anywhere, I look to see where the nearest pool is because I want to go there. So, but definitely I'm involved in anything on the water. I am not a land person at all. So, I love kayaking and I love swimming in the river and lakes and in my pool in my backyard. But in terms of actually doing the laps and that kind of thing, I think I had my fill.
Yes. Robin, old timers hockey, beers afterwards. What do you do now with your sport?
When I retired back in '99, I think I played one game. That's it after I retired. And I just when you're doing something day in and day out for year after year after year, 24 hours a day, 12 days a month, your mind needs a rest. It wasn't even the body; the mind needed a rest. And I did end up coaching for about 8 years or 10 years with my boys, and up until about 2 years ago, I stopped. 3 years ago, I stopped coaching, and I take the boys out on the ice once in a while. But now it's nice just to be a fan and be a dad and enjoy it.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you guys. It was a tremendous conversation, and I really enjoyed it. And I think people would find it very insightful and enlightening. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.